Good day, everyone. After knowing the definition of gel electrophoresis, our group would like you to join us learn about the steps in gel electrophoresis. To be fun, Group 2 would like you to introduce this game that we prepared. So what are we waiting for? Let's begin.
Good day, everyone. My name is Hilter. Can you help me climb the stairs by identifying the step in gel electrophoresis?
Yes, of course.
I really can pass through in the first step, but maybe if I will know the first step in gel electrophoresis, I can finally step up.
Step 1. The sample of agarose and the buffer, typically between 0.5% and 1% agarose, where 1% is equal to 1 gram per 100 ml, are mixed together and microwave for about 40 seconds to form a gel. After this, the solution is poured into a mold that has a comb placed to make holes for the DNA to be inserted. Then, using a stir plate, let it cool for 2 to 3 minutes.
Yay, well done! Now help me proceed with step 2. Can you show me the definition of the next step?
Step 2. On this step, PCR or polymerase chain reaction machine is used to amplify or copy a small segment of the DNA when there isn't enough to analyze. Also, at this method, we can generate billions of copies of a particular DNA fragment from a DNA extract. To amplify a segment of DNA using PCR, the sample is first heated for about 94 degrees Celsius so the DNA denatures or separates into two pieces of single-stranded DNA. Next is the use of a specifically designed primers that are complementary to the sequence, and the temperature must be lowered to 54 degrees Celsius so that one primer binds to each strand. Next, an enzyme called Taq polymerase serves as binding substance for free DNA nucleotides to come together while it is heated to 72 degrees Celsius. This process results in the duplication of the original DNA, with each of the newly synthesized DNA and the DNA strand that serves as a pattern.
It's a success! 4 more steps and we are already finished.
Step 3. At this step, we will add 64 microliters of a substance called loading dye. We need to add loading dye to each sample because it can increase the weight, help it sink into the well, and make the bands of DNA more visible. To add loading dye with our sample, first we need to set our micropipette to 5 microliters and then transfer 5 microliters of loading dye from the tube into the PCR tube containing the sample. Remember that if you drop the loading dye into the tube without your pipette tip touching the tube or the sample, you can use the same tip to add loading dye to the next sample. If your pipette tip touches the tube, discard the tip and make sure you use a fresh tip for the next sample. Also, if you have more than one sample, repeat each process mentioned. It may take 20 or 30 minutes to set or to harden, and after that, remove the comb.
We're halfway through! Few more steps to learn and we're done.
Step 4. After the loading the dye, we need to slowly put our digested DNA sample into the well using a micropipe plugger. Remember that we need to put it near the negative electrode so that when we begin to run the electric field, it can be briefly moved towards the positive electrodes. Once that the DNA samples had been loaded, carefully place the lid on the gel chamber with the terminals correctly positioned to the matching electrodes chamber. Negative to negative, positive to positive. After that, we will connect the electrodes to the power supply, then we will proceed to the next step.
You making me cry. Few more steps and I can finally go up.
Step 5. For the fifth step, this is where the running gel began to expose under an electric field. For agarose gels, they usually set an electric field at 100 or 130 volts until it can potentially melt the gel. The higher the current, the faster the molecules will move from the negative charge to the positive charge based on the size of the fragments of the DNA. But on the other side, if the migration of the DNA bands is slower, we can see a clearer vision of the results. We need to run it for about 45 to 60 minutes.
Oh, one final step and you are done learning the step of gel electrophoresis. Good job!
Final step, step 6. For the final step, this is where we expose the sample under a UV light or a light box to see the small bands of bromethanol blue running gel. At this point, we can finally observe the DNA ladder or the binding patterns formed by our DNA sample.
Thank you so much for helping me. I hope you learned something too. Also, I want to thank these persons for creating me.